Hi everyone, welcome to the Searchlight Sessions. I am your host, Maggie McClure, and today I have a very special guest with me, Mary Ramos from Los Angeles, California. Hi, Mary.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. So I want to tell our viewers a little bit about you. So Mary is a award-winning music supervisor and has helped create the musical identity of over 100 films. And her list of films include Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, Kill Bill Volume 1 and Volume 2, The Hateful Eight, along with P.S. I Love You, Spotlight, and Marshall, just to name a few. She has tremendous insight into how music is used in film and TV, and we are so excited to have you, Mary. Let's just start off by, can you tell us how you got into this business and what your path has been like to lead you to where you are today?
Oh, I wish it was a better story. I wish there was I went to this school and I studied this, and but it really was kind of serendipitous. That's a word. I did go to school for acting. I'm actually from the Midwest. I'm from Kansas City originally, and then I went to acting school and in New York, and moved to Los Angeles and met a young, then unknown director who was working on his first feature called Reservoir Dogs, and I met him through a friend, another actor who was in Reservoir Dogs, Tim Roth. Met him at a party. We talked about music. My boyfriend and I were in a band, not a great band, don't look it up, and just really talked about music a lot. And I needed a job, and so they introduced me to the music supervisor who was doing Reservoir Dogs, Karen Rackman, who was also the music supervisor on Pulp Fiction, by the way. I wanted to correct you on that. I was the music coordinator.
Okay.
So that's pretty much how I got into it. And that's actually a good lesson, though, for anybody who who's for the youngins who want to get into the entertainment industry. Be open to everything. Be open to lateral moves. I wanted to be an actor, and I ended up being a music supervisor, melding a couple of my favorite things, which is storytelling. I want to be a director too. Storytelling, music. I always collected soundtracks. And taking direction. I learned that, got pounded into me from school. So being open to the lateral move and making connections and making friendships wherever, you never know where they're going to turn up. So that's how I got into it. And it's been, I don't know how many years now, it's been almost 30, almost 30 years that I've been doing this and learning every step of the way, every single project I've done, film, television, and I just started doing video games with Wasteland 3. I've learned something new on every project. So it's really kind of a cool thing to be doing for me.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can say, from my personal experience, I definitely agree that you just have to be open to anything that comes across your table, and if it relates to what you want to do, like what you're saying, it's usually a good idea to say yes and figure it out and see where it leads.
I can't tell you how many projects I've done as favors. I've done for, $2, Magic Beans, Pocket Lint. I've done them for zero money. Just because I wanted the experience and I had the time. Those kinds of things too are always good to be open to. And I speak to any musician or composer that might be listening. It may sound like, wait a minute, I'm getting taken advantage of here. But you always have to weigh the experience and what you can get out of it, or what, over, compensation.
Yeah.
At least starting out.
Yeah.
Getting the experience, it's like you're going to college for it. It's like you're taking, filmmaking 101, 102. So you kind of weigh it against that.
Yeah.
I have experienced going to an indie band that hadn't had any placements. They didn't really have they'd only just come out with a record or an album. And they turned down a project because it was, not a lot of money. And they felt like they were being taken advantage of. And while I respect that, there was also that director from that project went on to do several other projects that made more money, more and more. So, it's just always good to weigh what it is that you're being offered, weigh the opportunity, and see if it's something that's worthwhile.
Definitely. Well, you have to start somewhere. And you're right. I mean, someone could end up, working on some incredible projects down the line. And you really just have to think about the potential and the far out, timeline versus the here and now. What does it pay right now? And yeah, and consider all of those things.
I mean, we all have, and especially people that are growing up now with all of the knowledge that they have. The internet's provided so much opportunity to be around music and from all over the place, and it's really easy to feel overqualified when you're young and when you're just starting out. But always remember that it's a staircase. So you start out at the bottom and you just keep taking those steps up, and that happens when you say yes to stuff. So anyway,
Exactly.
that's my soapbox. That's a little indication of what this is going to be like.
I love it. Well, okay, for those who don't know, can you explain what the role of the music supervisor is?
Yes, I can explain it from my perspective, because there are lots of music supervisors and everybody approaches the job differently. It's an individual type of a consulting um, job. I support the director's vision. I am responsible for all musical aspects of a film or TV or video game project. That's anywhere from spotting the picture for song as opposed to score spots. That's in, what else do I do? It's a lot, everything. I suggest songs, obviously. I suggest composers. I actually check composers' availability. I get appropriate reels. Sometimes I'll get reels from a composer agent that don't really, for a particular composer that I'm interested in, suggesting to the director, sort of like a composing casting director. And they'll send a reel that's kind of too general. Like I know that the director is interested in, hearing more evocative piano pieces. So I'll even go through what I have of the composer's work and like make my own reel based on what they have, so that I can present the best, more targeted reels to the directors. So I do that. I commission original songs from songwriters. I cast singers' voices. I if an actor is playing a musician and they're not a musician, I'll even organize a rock school for the actor to be able to rehearse holding the instrument, getting really comfortable with the instrument with an actual rock musician or whatever kind of musician, so that they're not held up by the behaviors of a musician. Because I think all of you, the musicians listening, could say that is a number one pet peeve about films that feature he's on stage and he's amazing, or she's on stage and she's amazing and she's holding the guitar improperly and it just looks like no.
Yeah.
So that's something that's really important, and that actually I think comes from my my background as wanting to be an actor. I think about what it's like to be in those shoes. So there's that. What else? I negotiate music clearances. That's something that not a lot of music supervisors. Well, some do, some don't. There are music clearance companies that do music clearances, but I like to do my own clearances mainly because I'm a control freak. But I also like to know that we're not going to be held up by a monetary issue for creative choices. So when I submit things to a director, I like to know that there's no problems. And that's something I've learned through my work with Quentin Tarantino, who loves to use, super obscure pieces of music. And so I've learned how to go to the nth to discover clearance rights and make sure that everything is, able to be used without anything coming out of the woodwork and stopping the creativity.
Yeah.
So basically, I hope that answers your question. It's all musical aspects. And each project's different. Each project's needs are different. Every director is different. Every storyteller is different. Every story's different.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you for expanding on all of that. All very interesting for sure. You've worked with a lot of different directors over the years. Do they have a similar process, different processes when it comes to choosing the music?
They're all different. It's a unique, storytelling is a unique thing. And it's somebody like a Quentin Tarantino is going to tell you a story and he's going to stop and he's going to describe what the main character is wearing and why they're wearing that. You know what I mean? And so there's that kind of detail to specific things, attention to specific detail. And then there's another director who's going to tell you a story that's based on emotions and and isn't going to be so detail oriented about, the music or the setting or there's just different focuses. And so it's my job, I see it, to fill in the blanks for them and support whatever their, vision is. I've worked on movies where directors are very, musically in tune, very music oriented, and directors who are not musically oriented at all. And so I view it as my job to I'll read the script and come up with my ideas about what I think a direction would be for the musical landscape. And I'll present those to the director and give them a chance to hone in on what they, want in those instances where they don't know what they want. So it's kind of fun. Every job is different. Every job has a challenge and every job has a learning possibility. It's, pretty great.
Awesome. Keeps it exciting, right?
Yeah, it does.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about editors. So temp tracks and editors, obviously you have to put a song in there of some sort in the editing process. Does that ever cause an issue? Has it caused an issue?
I wonder what you're talking about. Well, this goes into, there's so many different ways to come about this. Let's see. For filmmakers, it's my experience that it's good for filmmakers to really think about music beforehand, pay attention to music beforehand. It doesn't have to be creatively if you would prefer to have a music supervisor come in and help you come up with the creative aspect of it. But budgeting is really important to think about. Obviously budgeting, but a way to do that might be taking your script and just making a notation in the budget wherever there is a scene in a place where there might be music in the background. It doesn't have to be one of the big montage in your face moments. Those are the more expensive tentpole songs, but hotel lobbies, bar jukeboxes, Muzak in a convenience store, a 7-Eleven. I mean, anything like that might have music in it. It's good to make a notation in your budget for, a line in the budget for, because those have been the silent budget killers in my experience. Because as you're going through the cut, it's playing dry and it feels weird. It feels weird to be in a 7-Eleven and not have some kind of music playing. So it feels weird to be in a hotel lobby sometimes and not have music, or definitely in a bar. I worked on one movie that the majority of the scenes took place in a bar that the family owned, but they hadn't budgeted for any music to be playing. So it was a very unusual experience. Like, I had to do a lot of shifting around.
Yeah, I bet.
That's one thing. And then the other thing is, it helps be open-minded about your music choices, especially if your budget's tight. You don't want to plan an entire genius scene on one Radiohead song. It's the only song that'll work in that scene, and end up having to replace it because the band said no. So that's something I would say, especially if you're on a tight budget. It's good to consider using up and coming bands, local bands, original songs. That often can be the more creative aspect to your project, So that's one thing I would really try and counsel on.
Okay.
If a character says a line from a song, even if they say a couple, like one line of a verse of a song or one line of a chorus of a song, that counts as something you have to pay for. So all of these things musically, it's good to pay attention to and be ready for, so that you're not, so that you have options, creative options at the end of the day.
Sure. Yeah. And I'll speak a little bit about, being in a bar scene. Maybe the music is really low and you barely even hear it, but if that was taken away, we would all notice. But it's there, and you have to plan for songs even if they're barely heard. For example, one of my songs was used in a bar scene on the jukebox, and you literally could barely hear it. It was on the show Cougar Town, and I remember, we were all so excited, and I had everybody tuning in, and and we watched the whole thing, and I was like, well, I guess we missed it. And then I watched it back, ear pressed to the speaker. I was like, there it is. And it was in a bar scene. But it just goes to show you there's so many opportunities for songs to be used, whether it's in a big featured way or more in a background sense. So
to that point, I'll say your song provided a great energy to the scene. I'm assuming I haven't seen it, but I mean, it's no song, in my opinion, no song is placed, haphazardly. Everything's thought out. Everything's placed for a specific reason. There's only so much real estate for music in a project. So everything has to really be a specific choice for a reason. It's not thrown in there.
Right.
And I've actually placed songs in projects for their energy, and you can't really tell what song it is until the dialogue. There's a break in the dialogue or a tiny pause, and then you'll hear Dionne Warwick kind of singing "This Girl's in Love with You." An expensive song, but the scene needed it. This is for Mrs. America TV show. There was a scene outside of a bar. They're sitting al fresco outside of a bar, and you're not really supposed to hear music, but I wanted a song bleeding through the wall so it underlined their, dialogue and gave the scene a little warmth. And that's what's important. And I'd say that to any recording artist whose music is low in the background. It's never a wasted moment. It's always lending something super essential to the scene. So that's all I'll say.
That's awesome. I love that. Well, you talked about using music from local artists, which I think is awesome, from where a movie is filmed. So, for instance, us just working on Stillwater and you guys using some Oklahoma artists, I think that is awesome. And how did you go about finding the local talent whose music you used?
Well, there is a website. And when we first started, there was a website that was submitted by the Oklahoma Film Commission. And I went on that website and clicked on a lot of the artists. This is a bummer about that. A lot of the artists were no longer, they were not the correct contact information. Either the band had just banded or whatever. So that's actually something I'd love to touch on. for artists, for recording artists, musicians. If you want to prepare your music for use in media projects, it's good to have, it's good to make sure that your contact information is the most up to date with all the places that is possible for music supervisors to find out about you and to reach you. If you have a Facebook page, make sure that you have an email that you check regularly. That's listed on there, or your website. Make sure that you have contact info, a place to contact you on your website that is up to date, that you check. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to find a band because I've liked their music and it's an out of date contact, or there's no contact info. It may be cool, but it's not cool if I can't find you. So right. There's those kind of things. They sound like a big duh, but it's really important. Another thing is, if you are registered with one of the PROs like ASCAP or BMI, it's really good to check with them and make sure that the information they have on their database that's accessible by music supervisors is up to date with your current email that you check, or phone number that you check, or phone number that reaches you. Because as a music supervisor, we only have so many ways of finding you and finding out about you. YouTube channel. If you have a YouTube channel, it'd be great to have a contact, info. I hate those contact pages that say, fill in your info and we'll get back to you, because you never do. So that's one thing I would just please stress, to please update your info anywhere possible and make sure that you're easy to find. Second thing is, when you do submit music, there's metadata for each song that you submit that has your contact info. So there's that. Another thing, when music supervisors are looking for music, it's good to know that you have instrumentals of your songs. Like, it's fantastic to have the full version with the vocal, but sometimes in order to work around dialogue or for commercials, they like to have, be able to lift the vocal off and keep the song playing. You'll notice it now that I've said it. If you hadn't noticed it before, you'll notice it now. A lot of TV shows do this. But it's great to have, because it helps us to be able to work with your music into a scene that's already been shot and cut and everything edited. Mm-hmm. And actually, if you don't have to provide these, but if you have individual stems, like as many split stems of the track as possible, those are great to have on hand, ready to submit. If, for instance, advertisements love to receive your stems, percussion separate, strings separate, whatever, guitar, vocal, all that separated, so that they can sort of remix your song for their ad. Mm-hmm. To have a specific build at a certain spot, these 30 and 60-second spots, they have to have a build or something.
Yeah.
If you're interested in that kind of thing. What else? Clean versions. Be surprised how many songs I get that have expletives in essential, crucial parts of in the chorus. Oh. And it's like, or named as, just keep in mind that when you're submitting for things that are for film and television and advertisements, they only get so many F-bombs before it changes the rating of a film. They're not going to waste one on your song. Also, it changes the rating if it's got, suggestive lyrics or expletives in it. So make sure you have clean versions. And yeah. I'm gonna keep going on this, because this is something I've been thinking about for musicians who want to submit their music for film, television, advertisements, and games. It's good to know your target. It's good to know what kind of music you make. Is it the kind of music they use in advertisements for Cars or Target or Soup? Is it a Grey's Anatomy sound, or is it harder edged, like The Boys, which is on Amazon Prime? Are the lyrics too specific about a story or a person's name? It's good to have an idea of where you might fit in and aim for that. There's two types of songs that I've noticed that get used a lot. I end up calling for them a lot. Love songs, always evergreen. Love songs always get used, and swagger songs. So, and swagger can be all kinds of, music that just gives the character a little personality. I can tell you how many times that song, How You Like Me Now by The Heavy, is used again and again and again and again. But that's a really great example of a swagger song. So, those are great to have on hand and have in your arsenal if you want to get used in film and television. Okay. Clearance wise, if you are the sole writer and sole artist on a track, that's great. You can actually represent the song as an easy, clear, one stop. And that's what music supervisors like myself love to hear from artists that we're not familiar with. However, if there are other people playing on the track or singing on the track, or if there is another person who wrote lyrics or produced or whatever, those are things you need to have side agreements with everybody else before you can submit the music. You have to have those side agreements signed and in place and agreed to before you even submit the music. Because if you do submit something that's not been, that hasn't been agreed to, it opens up the deep pockets of the film company to lawsuits, kinds of things. So you just don't want to be, and that's it. That's it for, word gets around, it's bad. So it's just good to have and it's good to have your music cleared anyway. So you know what's what. Get the hard conversations over with, first and foremost. And then one thing I'd say is, if it's possible for you to get a sync agent to represent you. These are people that they have contacts with music supervisors. They represent libraries, or they represent indie artists or indie labels. They get all the briefs from music supervisors of what they're looking for their projects. Sometimes those briefs are really broad. Sometimes they're really specific, but they're really great. They often outline what the project is, what the budget parameters are, that kind of thing. And they'll maybe give you a, song they're trying to replace and why. The sync agents will take a percentage of whatever sync fees they get for you. You know this, right? So they'll take either 10 or 15%, I don't know what it is, the going rate these days, of the sync fees that they get for you, sync and master fees. It's up to you. Many of them will not ask for publishing. And it's up to you whether you want to share, whether you want to do a deal for publishing on those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. I often counsel not to, because, that's yours. So, there are sync agencies that won't take it from you. Right. I think that's all I think that's all I had written down.
Wow. Well, that was a lot of extremely helpful information. Thank you.
Too much?
No, really, really valuable, and all things that artists and musicians need to be aware of when they're trying to get into this world of sync licensing. So a couple of things that came to my mind. One, Oklahoma artists definitely be registered with the Oklahoma Film and Music Office registry so that your music is available to people like Mary. Very important to have the updated contact information on there so that she can reach you and find you. And I mean, what a horrible thing to miss out on an opportunity like that. So it's really important to have your contact info up to date. Use the film office registry for sure. And also, we at Searchlight are a sync licensing agency. So if you're interested in submitting to be a part of our roster, you can do that on our website, as we've touched on before. But yeah, to your point, a lot of agents, I've had many in my experience, take anywhere between 20 and 50%. And so it just depends on the individual agency. But those are some things I wanted to share and reflecting on what all the awesome things that you just said.
Yeah, that's super important. Music supervisors these days don't take unsolicited music very readily for some of those reasons I talked about. That if you don't know the band or don't know the label, it's very hard to submit them for a big budget project where there could be any kind of issue with the music. So it's if they come through a sync agent, it's something that has been vetted.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you guys were amazing on this project. Searchlight was amazing on this project that we shot in Oklahoma.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been great to work.
We used a lot of red dirt music. Some of the pioneers of the red dirt music, and that was interesting. Jimmy Lefebvre, trying to I'm saying his name incorrectly. Trying to track down his information and his contact information, or his publishing contact. He's passed away, but reaching out and into the community and getting a lot of help back from the community was really great. So it's another reason for making sure that everything's up to date.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about soundtracks. So it seems like they used to be a huge deal. And I remember, just being obsessed with soundtracks for different movies growing up. Why do you think today not as many movies are having soundtracks as before? What's your take on that?
Well, from my perspective, soundtracks tend to be compilations of existing music, and because CDs don't sell so much anymore, since it's mostly a digital, Spotify releases are the norm these days. It doesn't make sense to do a compilation of previously released songs, especially if you're going to put it up on Spotify. We encountered this with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, actually. It didn't really bother us because, the songs were so, unique, and they were, they sounded the way they sounded on purpose, by the way. They were supposed to sound like they were coming out of an AM radio. But we also had snippets. We wanted to put things on the album that were unique to the album. So we had snippets from the radio DJs and pieces from the vintage commercials and ads and stuff, which gave it a little bit more of a unique thing. But soundtracks, generally, that's the reason, is that unless it's like original songs, things that are unique only to that film or that TV project, then that makes sense to put out a soundtrack. It always makes sense to put out a soundtrack, I think, but if you're going to go through the energy of promoting and everything, there has to be something on there that's unique to the film.
Yeah, I would say definitely it really makes sense when there's a new song that was made for the film. So if you can at least have one of those in there, that would definitely help. I mean, I think it's so easy to put a soundtrack up these days digitally that why not, do that, because you could make extra income from that. We've worked on a couple films recently where there were quite a few custom songs and existing songs as well, but it has generated some extra income for the film, and it really didn't cost them that much to put the soundtrack up. So
I've seen it from both perspectives, from the record company's perspectives and from the from the filmmaker's perspective. It always makes sense to put something out because it's a marketing tool. It's another avenue for eyes to be directed to your project, people to be directed to your
yeah.
But like we did a soundtrack for Little Fires Everywhere, which was a television series I worked on. we had score that was unique. So we put out a score album that was by Isa Machine from Florence and the Machine and Mark Isham. They did the score. And then we also put out an EP of the covers that we had done. We had unique covers done of 90 songs by that were produced by Isa and Mark. So those things were unique to the project and worth, and deemed worthwhile to put the time into. But
Yeah.
I mean, again, I think it's always a great idea to try and do it.
Sure.
Your score is always, the score is always worth, putting up.
Yeah, agreed. Well, obviously we've all been dealing with COVID and how it's affected everyone. How has it affected you and maybe projects that you are supposed to be working on? Has it slowed you down any? And what do you foresee in the next year, and how it's just affected the entire film business?
It's been a year. I was lucky enough to be mostly finished with 2 television projects that I was working on. Little Fires Everywhere. We finished the last remotely. We finished Little Fires Everywhere remotely, and This Is America, we ended up scoring remotely. Chris Bowers, our amazing film composer, actually pioneered a way to record via, Zoom with his orchestra.
Wow.
So that was a really cool way to deal with it. I have a couple projects that I'm supposed to be prepping, pre-records for. These are, recording before we shoot, where a band is going to be on stage, an orchestra is going to be on stage performing, and it's we're just in a holding pattern because we don't know when we're going to get the opportunity to be in the same place. And we've kind of thought about doing it remotely, but some of the energy, there's one in particular that's a rap group, and they're used to performing together and feeding off of each other's energy, and it's not going to be the same doing it remotely. So it has called for us to be, patient. It's called for us to be, think outside the box, which has been good. Stop being such perfectionists, and it has to be this way. But mostly it's, giving us time to cool our heels and, focus on other things that are important.
Yeah. Well, how do you think it may affect budgets moving forward? Do you think it will?
Oh, it already has. I mean, the COVID testing has been added to budgets. I'm not a producer, but I hear things. And the precautions have added to budgets.
Mm-hmm.
That worries me because budgets were tight already in terms of music. And I really hope that it doesn't further tighten things on the music end.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of music budgets, I mean, we're talking to filmmakers as well as musicians here. What advice would you have for filmmakers at any level when they're thinking about music or not thinking about it in the beginning stages, and what kind of budget should they set aside for music?
Oh, okay. I did kind of speed past this earlier, but I'll usually it's good to think about 10% of your overall budget for music. And score should be separate. Your composer, you can do different kinds of deals with your composers. There's a deal that you can do where it's an all-in deal, as long as you provide, enough money for your recording. One thing I would say is if you are tight on budget, and this relates to your temp track, it's a good idea idea not to consider a big, huge, or not to tempt with like huge Hans Zimmer orchestras. If you have a tight budget, unless you like the sound of sampled orchestra, and they have really great samples these days. But it's just a consideration. It's something to think about. It doesn't have to sound like an indie, made in my garage, indie movie score, because there are amazing, ways to create music for bands, and can do score these days, thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
But those are things to think about too. It all sounds, and it's probably insulting because it sounds like a very basic, but it's just good, good to think about.
Yeah.
And so 10% of the budget, and also, like I said, just really be open about music. Don't be closed-minded. Don't absolutely have to have a Led Zeppelin song. We've all heard the stories. Be open-minded. If it's a period piece and it's going to require music from the 70s, for instance, that's classic catalog, and it's not going to be inexpensive. So whenever possible, think about, indie bands, local bands, the odd way B-sides, the deep cuts, crate digging. So there's many things you can do. Rap. Monique had asked me to bring up rap, by the way. When you're a musician or filmmakers, if you're dealing with unrepresented rap music, you just want to make sure that samples are paid attention to and have been pre-cleared, or that kind of a thing. It's a unique thing to rap music, and it's something you want to pay attention to when you're getting ready to use something in your project. So yeah, and again, just I was going to say, if anytime there's a music mention, anytime there's, you can say the title of a song. I think you can get away with without having to pay it. But I'm trying to think of an instance.
It's all good to know. I mean, definitely if you're using music or ideas from other songs or anything like what you're saying, just know you're going to have to do some research and make sure you're in the clear, and you're going to need some money for that. So
people say the word fair use a lot when they don't know what they're talking about. Fair use is something that music supervisors back away from, because that's something we can't declare. That's something only a music attorney can declare. And then even then it's a gray area, and it's up to the producers to decide, whether it's something they want to go forward with.
Right.
It usually only pertains to certain documentary scenes, but in a non-documentary project, fair use isn't really a thing. So you don't get away with, and parody rules, as people often say, that's parody. We can get that for free. It's like, no, you can't. You have to, unless you enjoy being, sued, have to really pay attention to this stuff. One other thing I want to touch on is public domain. Public domain is something that can be great for filmmakers, but you have to be really sure that it is public domain in the entire world, because your film or your project is going to be seen all over the world. You're going to release it all over the world. So you need to, and you don't want to be hemmed in by certain territories and have to remix the film if it gets, purchased in Mexico, right?
Right.
So the general rule of thumb for public domain for music is 100 years past the composer's death. So It is that way in Mexico. In in the United States, it's something different. But for the world, is who you want to, is what you want to make sure is cleared. So these websites that say, here's a list of public domain songs. Oftentimes they're not talking about for the world. They're talking about for the United States. And that's, it's not useful for filmmakers. So that's a general rule of thumb. When you're thinking about a public domain song, look at the composer's date of death and add 100 years to it. If it's after that, then it's probably okay to assume it's a public domain. However, there's even more to it. If you use a public domain song and you use the same one that Bob Dylan did, that's Bob Dylan's arrangement of that. So he owns the publishing on it, and so you have to pay him for that particular arrangement. If you're going to use a public domain song and it's 100 years past the date of the composer's death, make sure you use the exact public domain sheet music to create your piece. That's a lot. That's a lot to digest, and I'm sorry, but it's a pet peeve of mine because I often meet with directors who say, well, that's public domain. I had one director who said, this is a Hebrew prayer. It's in the public domain. It's a prayer. And I said, well, the prayer is public domain, but the music underneath it is not. And there was a company in Israel who came forward and said, that's ours. So we worked out a deal with them and they were great. But when you think it's public domain, you have to double check.
Wow.
Which brings me to, if you have the budget, it's a good idea when you have a project to hire a music supervisor. These are all the things that we handle. These are all the things that we think about. It's what we think about. We come to your project thinking about all these potential things, and we're problem solvers. And it just seems to make more sense. And a lot of times we'll save you the money, that it'll be worth the money you spend on a music supervisor, because we'll save you the money in the long run, and we'll save you the headaches. So that's my 2 cents. And the way you can find a supervisor, all of us are in different, budget ranges. So you can find them through the Guild of Music Supervisors. You can reach out to them, and there's a list of contacts. So
awesome. Thank you. You can save a lot of people a lot of headaches.
Headaches. Yes. And in regards to sync agents, you guys are a great sync agent to start with, especially for Oklahoma artists, because of your initiative and working with productions that are shooting in Oklahoma. There's also, you can look up on IMDb, has a soundtrack listing, and you can look up the soundtrack listings and see if there's any particular sync agents that are listed, that are named in the credits, the music credits, and you can look them up.
Yeah. Are there any specific ones that you like to work with on a regular basis?
Oh, that's a hard one to answer because I work with all of them, especially, I will say, and not all of them have the same policy about accepting unsolicited music. So it's hard to say. I love bank robber music, the Talent House, Stacey Slater, Lip Sync, Terror Bird. Oh my God, I'm going to forget some of them. Because they're really great. Marmoset is great. Mm-hmm. Lead 101 Records are fantastic, but I think they're very specific. Anyways,
that's great. Helpful.
Oh, Truly Music too. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Wendy.
Yeah. So it's a good idea to check out. Now that we all have a lot of time on our hands, it's a good time to check out some of your favorite. If you are a big fan of Justified, which I am, rewatch that series. on a regular basis. It's so good. It's good to do a little research about Justified, do a little research about the songs they used. They used a lot of indie music in that show. Mm-hmm. So it's good to look up where they got that music and maybe target those kinds of people.
Well, I have one more thing I wanted to ask you about. I'm sure you've been a part of a lot of situations where there have been pre-records and musicians on set. What are your overall tips to filmmakers? I know for me personally, being on set many times, most of the time, or at least half of the time, it seems like a lot of the details are not taken care of before we get to set. So what would be your advice on that?
Well, you plan it out like any kind of scene. It's just because it involves music doesn't mean it doesn't get, the proper rehearsal and the proper setup and the proper, sound. And so it's always good to make sure you've cleared the song before you shoot to it. Or if it hasn't cleared and you're a stickler about it, it's good to shoot coverage, shoot takes without the song, shoot takes where the actor doesn't sing along. That's something actually that's important to know. There's different types of uses when you're clearing music. Certain types of uses are more expensive than others. If an actor sings along with it or sings it a cappella, those are more expensive because they're married to the film and the publisher knows it and says, well, that's going to be, triple the price. So it's always good to shoot coverage of scenes where the actor's not singing, or shoot where we're not married to the music being used. I mean, when you're playing in a club and there's a band on stage, they're miming to a thump track, because if you played the music, it'd be incredibly hard to, edit in post-production and match scenes and match different camera angles because the music doesn't match up. So we create a thump track that's in the same time as the song. And some directors have said, I want the band to look like they're playing. They got to play on stage, That's why, they're actors. They can play, you just don't record their music and you're able to, swipe it out. Anyways, it's all technical. But one thing also is that leads into, it's good to have a playback person on set. Their one job is to be responsible for playback. And that way they can edit the music shorter. If you discovered, I don't want that whole 3-minute song playing. I'm not going to shoot 3 minutes of an actor mouthing to the music. I just want the end chorus and the ending of the song. A playback editor can edit the song to do that for you. Yeah. They can also, they're used to being able to work on the spot. They also, if you ask them to, they can also watch lip sync and make, notations for you on lip sync. Whether that take, the lip sync was a little off, So anyways, those are a few of the things. My main note about that is cover yourself, so that and shoot it without the music or shoot it with a different song. As opposed, you can shoot the Led Zeppelin or the Radiohead song, but shoot it also with, Joe from, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. All very wise words. Thank you for that.
I mean, well, the thing is, at the end of the day, you don't want to have to, have money cut your creativity. You always want to have an open creative process. And the way you can do that is by being prepared. So having the music cleared beforehand or having 3 different choices beforehand, if you haven't made up your mind yet, shoot all 3 and shoot one without. It's just giving yourself the most creative choice at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. I mean, from my experience, I've been on both sides where I've been a featured artist singing a custom song that I wrote with the director. And for that, we had to do a pre-record. We had the sound system, and I was essentially lip syncing to myself. We didn't have a playback person, and so we had to, on set, the director decided he wanted to take out this one section, with everyone there, no pressure, right? And so we had to do that on the spot, which was crazy, but thankfully we were prepared. We brought anything that we might need. And then I've been a part of bands that are more in the background as well. And the director does want us to look like we're playing the song. And in those instances, it seems like half the time we know what song we'll be playing, and then the other half we just show up and hope for the best. But
I've had experiences where the directors changed their mind at the last minute, and it's really put a lot of pressure on the actor to switch, so it's always better to be able to prepare beforehand, and also prepare the actors beforehand. What I like to do is, if they're going to be lip syncing, which they should be, nobody should sing live on camera. Okay. Nobody should sing live on camera. They shouldn't. Yeah. Because you're going to do multiple takes and your voice is going to split.
Right.
It's going to sound like garbage. I can't tell you the movie, but there's a great singer who sings karaoke in a movie. I just gave you a clue. And his voice is his voice is split, and he's, kind of screeching into the microphone, and he's got a gorgeous voice. But it's because he insisted on singing live, and they took the 5th take because they liked the way he looked. They didn't care what he sounded like.
Oh.
So it's just always a good thing. Anyways, pre-recording is key. But I like to give the actors, a lot of prep beforehand. They get the lyrics, they get the song. If I can get them the a cappella that they can rehearse to, they have that. It's just good to give your actors as much prep possibility as possible. Same thing as with a guitar.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, all good tidbits. I've only had to sing live on camera once, and it was when I was on The Middle on ABC, and we were supposed to sound not so great. So I guess it worked out.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Oh my gosh, that's terrible.
So I guess for that instance, it makes sense.
That's always kind of interesting too, is that when a script says, she can't sing and she's singing at the top of her lungs, or the band is terrible, or, or whatever. They don't mean really terrible. They mean movie terrible. So exactly. It can't be like ear-shattering. It has to be, movie terrible.
Right. Well, it's funny because for those, of course, everyone in the band or the singers are all professional. And then they tell them, okay, here's the level of badness we want you guys at. And they had us do that. They had us start really bad. And they're like, okay, that's too bad.
Right.
Make it a little better. We're like, okay. And so exactly, movie terrible.
Right.
Totally get that.
Always remember, at the end of the day, it is a movie. It's not real life, and so it's got to be listenable at least.
Exactly.
So.
Well, before we go, is there anything else? Any other tidbits of advice you'd like to offer? You've covered a lot. Thank you.
God, I think I gave a master class in.
You did.
2 cups of coffee. I gave you guys. I just unscrewed all of my knowledge and just. No, I think I've covered it all. If you have any other questions, you are a great source.
Oh, well, thank you. We so appreciate your time today, Mary. Thank you for being with us and for sharing all this very, very helpful and valuable information. So we're going to close out today's series. Remember, guys, it's designed to help up-and-comers in the entertainment industry to expand ways that they can be successful. Stay tuned for some takeaway ideas from this Searchlight session to help with your success. Thank you so much, Mary.